If there is one supplement that is most misunderstood and its use scares people the most, I would say that it's vitamin A. I decided to build this video for a few reasons. One, because I recommend it at times, and now I can just refer people to this video as I'm not going to explain my recommendations to everyone. Two, you should be aware of the facts. Three, it's now in the news given the talk of measles and RFK Jr. mentioning vitamin A. And lastly, I've had a number of acne patients who have had in the past taken Accutane, which is a form of vitamin A, and are all seeing me with gut problems. If you're new, be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel and also follow me on Instagram and Facebook as The Microbiome Expert. We'll begin with food sources. You can get provitamin A from the carotenoids in plants, or you can get preformed vitamin A, aka retinol esters, from animal sources. As for carotenoids, yellow, orange, and even green fruits and vegetables, such as sweet potatoes, spinach, and papaya, all contain appreciable amounts of carotenoids. The main consideration is whether or not the body is able to make enough vitamin A from these food sources for optimal health. Absorption and conversion vary greatly, impacted by the type of carotenoid source, the way the food is prepared, the fat content of the meal, stomach acidity, and more. What more? The primary site in the body to convert dietary carotenoids to active vitamin A occurs within the intestinal mucosa, with the help of other factors such as bile salts. This is not typical for vitamin activation. This ability of intestinal mucosa to convert on the spot is indicative of the importance of vitamin A within the intestinal mucosa. But if you are dysbiotic, your intestinal mucosa may be compromised, and you may have bile acid dysmetabolism. Then there is the issue of genes. The ability to convert carotenoids to active vitamin A varies greatly. But as of now, we are not able to identify among us who converts efficiently and inefficiently. Hence the quote from these authors, therefore, provitamin A carotenoids might not be a good vitamin A source for those subjects of the poor converter phenotype. In addition to everything I just mentioned, we also have to consider that vitamin A is depleted in times of infection, stress, sickness, lactation, and intense exercise. Vitamin A from animal sources is clearly the better option, and we can see how useful it can be in Table 1. Here, we see plenty of data for benefit in measles, here for pneumonia, and here for diarrhea. But its benefit far exceeds fighting off bad actors, which it does quite well. For example, on the flip side of the immune equation, vitamin A also plays a key role in immune tolerance. This is a topic I mention often. Think autoimmune disease. I have mentioned the balance between the regulatory immune cells and the Th17 immune cells many times. When it comes to immune function, what you want is for a robust immune response to repel any invader, but then reestablish order and tolerance following the successful defense. Vitamin A provides both things. Here in Table 1 and later when we cover IgA, you will see how it helps with the robust immune response. But it also helps greatly with immunotolerance. You see, among the many things it does, it affects the T regulatory Th17 balance by its actions within the cell nucleus. It does this in part to what's called FOXP3. Via this nuclear activity, TGF converts naive T cells into the desirable T regulatory cells. However, during inflammation, this same TGF can promote the less desirable Th17 cells. In addition, in the pro-inflammatory environment, those very same beneficial Treg cells can be transformed into the pro-inflammatory Th17 cells. But due to vitamin A's action on FOXP3, the Treg state is maintained. Again, crucial for autoimmune considerations. See my videos on autoimmune disease to learn more about this. Also, something to consider on this note. During my consultations, women frequently tell me that they have Hashimoto's or are simply hypothyroid. Well, you should know that the thyroid gland requires more vitamin A than any other gland. Vitamin A is not to be feared, it's to be appreciated for its extreme value. When you consider the balance of dietary sources and potential using up of vitamin A stores from dysbiosis, COVID, stress, etc., we just don't get enough. The wolf instinctively appreciates the value of vitamin A. When it makes a kill, the liver is the first thing eaten and fought over. Liver, which tastes awful, is by far and away the best source. But who eats liver? Some fish contain a fraction of what's in liver, then some cheeses, butter, and eggs contain a fraction of that. But for the wolf, and for us, the vitamin A plays not just a role in immune function, but other key areas such as eye health, reproduction, and growth. From this article entitled Vitamin A as Anti-Infective Therapy, 1920 to 1940, we see some pretty interesting quotes. First, we see a pharmaceutical ad before drugs became wildly profitable that states, quote, whooping cough, measles, mumps, chickenpox, scarlet fever may do greater harm than most mothers think. The children will have lighter cases, they recover quicker, and are less likely to be left with some permanent injury if they build up good general resistance in advance to fight them. One precaution to build up the resistance of children is to give them resistance-building vitamin A. Vitamin A is the important factor which increases their fighting power in time of illness. And then there's this quote, with the outbreak of World War II, concern was raised over the crowded conditions of underground bomb shelters in London and the spread of respiratory and diarrheal disease. It was proposed that fortification of margarine with vitamin A would help to reduce the risk of infection. Cod liver oil was provided by the British Ministry of Food for children under 5 and for pregnant and breastfeeding women. So the question becomes, how much can we give? When I recommend vitamin A following my consultations, people tend to freak out. So here are just a few of many references I could have chosen. Vitamin A is commonly administered in areas of concern, and the dose is commonly 200,000 IUs twice per year, as seen here. And here is a Crohn's trial where 50,000 IUs was given twice per day for 14 months, where the authors quote, no toxic effects of vitamin A were observed during the study. And here in this study, where they talk about how, quote, the immunopathogenesis of multiple sclerosis involves an impaired balance of Th17 cells and regulatory T cells, they used a dose of 25,000 IUs per day. And even if we look at the Merck manual for measles, we see under treatment for vitamin A, the dose for children over 12 months, 200,000 IUs, for 6 to 11 months, 100,000 IUs, and for less than 6 months, 50,000 IUs. So where does our fear of vitamin A come from? Some from ridiculous studies, many of which were using animal studies, using doses far, far in excess of anything we'd consider. Another source is from the drug Accutane, which is no longer available, but it is in generic drugs, using the same molecule. To the left, we see normal vitamin A, which exists in the form of retinol, and retinoic acid, RA, among which RA shows the most biologic activity. RA exists in 2 significant derivatives, the 9-cis and the all-trans. To the right, we see a similar but slightly different structure, that of the drug isotretinoin, aka 13-cis retinoic acid. It's a retinoic acid isomer. The most biologically active form is the all-trans retinoic acid. Then comes the 9-cis isomer, which is less biologically active. Even less so is the 13-cis retinoic acid, isotretinoin. When we consider that 10,000 IUs equals 3 milligrams, and the recommended dosage range for Accutane is 0.5 to 1 milligram per kilogram per day, so if we assume a person of 60 kilograms at 1 milligram per kilogram per day, that's 60 milligrams per day, which equals 200,000 IUs of active vitamin A, which is the much less biologically active version. So I can see 2 problems with this. One, we're administering the active form in high doses, something we'd never do for vitamin D, for example. Second, since it's such high doses but less biologically active, it's probably occupying vitamin A receptors and preventing the other two more bioactive forms from binding and carrying out their valuable missions. How valuable? When we're just looking at gene expression, retinoic acid has been described to regulate the expression of up to 500 to 800 genes. I hope you're enjoying the video so far. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and recommend to friends and family. Also, if you're feeling extra generous, hit the super thanks below. But the retinyl esters of palmitate, stearate, oleate, palmitoleate, or linoleate, which come from the diet, are not active vitamin A. The active form is retinoic acid. Inside the cell, retinoic acid production from the esters occurs in a three-step process. So this is a controlled process. Much like with vitamin D, you can have sun exposure or dietary intake of vitamin D, but you're not taking active vitamin D, which is 125D. You make the active vitamin D from a controlled process in the kidneys. But for some reason, let me guess, profits, we bombard some people with active vitamin A, and there are consequences. If you have taken or are taking isotretinoin, then I suggest you read the package insert and the incredibly lengthy list of warnings. This gives vitamin A a bad name. Here alone is just a selection on birth defects. And here is just one of the many other warnings, this one on IBD, which is an extreme case of dysbiosis. See my videos on Crohn's and ulcerative colitis. Perhaps this is why I hear a history of Accutane use so many times in my consultations. My people pretty much all have gut problems. So, is there a connection? It appears so. This warning was mandated on the package insert, and we know that drug companies don't want that to happen, and we know how much integrity the FDA has. So if it's listed, there must be something to it. So if you have acne, perhaps you can reach out to me and try a more intelligent approach. So I won't have to hear any more quotes from my intakes like, quote, I took Accutane for 1 year for acne. Quote, I took Accutane for acne and got severe mental issues. Another warning. Quote, I took Accutane for 6 months. Quote, Accutane really dries out the skin and lips. I took it 10 years ago, but my lips are still very dry. After Accutane, I had low mood and high anxiety. And finally, quote, I think my trigger was Accutane, which I took for acne. I was going through stress and had COVID at the time. So now let's talk about IgA for a bit, which is how vitamin A carries out some of its many benefits. Humans can produce several grams of IgA every day, accounting for 3/4 of the body's total immunoglobulin content. IgA, together with mucus and antimicrobial peptides, forms the first line of defense for intestinal epithelial cells, protecting them from a significant number of intestinal antigens. We can see in Table 1 the role of IgA in regards to the features that make bad bacteria bad, such as adhesion or binding of bacteria, the mobility, toxin production, and more. So think about this. The gut is the most probable route of entry for a pathogen, which is why some 70 to 80% of our immune system is in the gut. And you should find it interesting that vitamin A is converted into its metabolically active form, retinoic acid, within the intestinal epithelial cells, unlike vitamin D, for example, which is converted to its active form in the kidneys. And, as we just stated, IgA is by far the #1 immunoglobulin produced in the body, as a part of the first-line defense. And, as these authors state, to further connect the dots, IgA levels are under the control of the metabolism of vitamin A. Thus, dietary vitamin A is a key player in regulating IgA production within the intestine, acting via multiple immunological pathways. Or, as these authors state, quote, vitamin A is known to influence the production of secretory immunoglobulin A, predominantly in the gut, where it is a critical component of the first line of defense on mucosal surfaces. And as they show in their paper, that when vitamin A intake was below the estimated average requirement, that IgA levels were significantly lower as compared to when vitamin A intake was above the estimated average requirement. Of course, I need to bring up taxes to connect this to my other videos. Here we have in Figure A on the left side the taxa that are underrepresented in an IgA deficiency. Do these names sound familiar? Eubacterium, Coprococcus, Faecalibacterium, and Ruminococcus. And on the right side, we have taxa which are overrepresented in an IgA deficiency: Streptococcus, Veillonella, and E. coli. And this paper hints at what we just saw, the point being that IgA, which is controlled by vitamin A, can help stabilize the microbiome, not only by fending off the bad actors, but directly or indirectly supporting the health promoters, which we just saw were decreased in an IgA deficiency. Now we're going to look at vitamin A in some disease states. Here we have a paper on children with persistent diarrhea. The genus Enterococcus, one of the classic opportunistic pathogens I always mention, dominated the microbiome of the vitamin A deficient group at a whopping 45%. I'll read two of their quotes for you to reinforce key points I always make. For those of you who know my videos, I'll sound like a broken record. But for those of you who are new, welcome. This is at the core of my philosophy. They state, quote, "A crucial component of gut microbiota diversity might be the significant decrease of butyrate-producing bacteria in the gut microbiota of patients with vitamin A deficiency. Adequate butyrate can suppress overgrowth of pathogenic bacteria and reinforce the intestinal defense barrier." And quote, "Vitamin A deficiency leads to destruction of the gastrointestinal mucosal barrier and increases the risk of mucosal infection." Here we have what's called graft versus host defense disease, which in layman's terms is transplant rejection, which is initiated by cytokine release from tissues damaged during the preparative regimen, particularly the gut mucosa. The damaged gut epithelium allows translocation of bacterial molecules into the bloodstream, activating the immune system and a worsening of tissue destruction and inflammation. In Figure 3, the MBI-LCBI means mucosal barrier injury laboratory confirmed bloodstream infections. You can see a significant difference in MBI-LCBI in those with higher vitamin A versus those with lower. This speaks to not only gut integrity and permeability, see that video, but also immune tolerance, see those videos. Here we have an asthma paper. The lungs have a microbiome as well, and of course, an immune system, which needs to be more tolerant and less hypervigilant. Here they found significant differences in vitamin A between healthy controls and severity of asthma. And in this Crohn's paper, it was found that in the 52 Crohn's patients, 21% had low vitamin A, which is a far higher percentage than normal. And lastly, in this autism paper, they reference a previous study where 80% of autistic children were found to have a vitamin A deficiency. And this finding was confirmed in the new paper, as seen in Figure 1, where those with autism had significantly lower serum retinol levels as compared to healthy controls. Lastly, I want to end talking about the combination of vitamins A and D. During my consultations, when I ask about supplements currently being taken, I almost always hear vitamin D, and I practically never hear vitamin A. And sometimes the vitamin D dose is excessive, and that can cause problems. I even made a video talking about that. Feel free to check it out. Now, you have to understand that oftentimes vitamin A and D work together. There are a number of papers which show this, but we'll only look at two. In the text box, I have highlighted how the authors talk about how as much as 70 to 80% of the gene expression induced by vitamin D requires vitamin A. And in this paper, they talk about the synergistic effect of the two and use the term heterodimer, which really just means that the two just form a joint unit, which is more impactful than either alone. Now, there is still more to be learned in this area, and it's very difficult to say what is the ideal blend of dosing of each to meet the needs of a given individual. But we do know that excessive doses of one appears to deplete the levels of the other, and this is ameliorated or fixed by applying the missing vitamin to the equation. So the takeaway here is, don't get carried away with the vitamin D hype and neglect and possibly worsen what are already probably low levels of vitamin A. Vitamin D is not the fix-all solution. I've been in this industry for over 2 decades, and I don't see people's health getting any better since we've been on these different fads over the years, vitamin D included. In fact, as evidence that so many of the unwell people in my consultations talk of their extensive vitamin D use is proof that it's not the magic pill everyone seems to think that it is. Once again, my goal is to provide you with information you have not seen before. Internationally, we are all in trouble. If you could hear the stories I hear during my consultations, your head would explode. I offer science and experience. I don't offer fads. As the former director of medical education for a microbiome firm, and now with my own platform, I've been able to help legions of people over the years. Check out my videos and testimonials. When you're comfortable with what you've seen, I invite you to get whichever of my protocols is right for you, or you can schedule a consultation with me. I offer tough love. I need to drive significant change in your microbiome quickly. I often make people uncomfortable for the first 2 or 3 weeks. You probably won't like me too much at first, but once you cross over the hump, you begin to reap the rewards. I have a certain way of doing things. No radical long-term diets, no probiotics, no fermented foods, just science and results. And feel free to leave in the comments to this video any opinions or experience you've had with vitamin A. If you liked the video, don't forget to subscribe. Also, somewhere around here, you can go to my website where you can schedule a consultation with me. You can also view the protocols, and here you can watch the next video.